Okay, for those of you who are sticking with it, this is part two of my Sunday morning chat. Well, we could call it the Sunday afternoon chat, as I've split it into two. As I say, it's too long and I can't expect people to spend all their time on my channel. There's other channels to watch as well. Like I do, I watch other people's. So this is the second half of what was an extended Sunday morning chat. Right, this one is now predictable. When I got this, it had some damaged leaves, some of which are still blatantly obvious that somebody chopped off unceremoniously, and I had two damaged growing points. Yeah, and I expected and anticipated them to this to shoot out immediately behind those damaged growing tips. Well, there's the damaged growing tip, and there are the 1, 2, 3, 4 new growths that pushed out behind it. I love it when a plan comes together. And then over this side, again, I expected it to push out behind there, which it has done. Now I've got a trapped leaf here. I'm going to deal with that. This is probably one of the strongest new growths pushing up here. And as you can see, if I get the other leaves out of the way, yeah, it's got a pair of leaves on here, and one of them's hooked inside the other one. That's not normal. What else isn't normal? 2 leaves. So I wouldn't have expected that to happen. They have a single leaf on the end of each cane. Oh, this is Brassivola little stars, this one. But anticipation on this, all of these new growths that are pushing out, and there are many, 1, 2, funny looking 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's 8 or 9 new growths. I will expect all of them to bloom, but they probably won't do it until we get either into winter or heading out the other side. They may bloom early, but we shall see. But they're not going to bloom till the canes are mature. Yeah? It has bloomed already. I have seen the blooms on this, but that is a very strange leaf. I wonder if that will just lift out. Yes, it will. I've just lifted that out. So I've now got a cane with 2 leaves on. That one may well straighten up. If it gets a bit of a push from below, it may straighten up. But that's unusual. I don't think any of the others are going to do it. So I will anticipate blooms on that as and when those canes mature, but it could be seasonal. So it may be as they mature. It might be that it's got to go into winter and come out the other side. I don't need to know. But I have got a record of when it bloomed last time, and that may be when it blooms again. But what we have got is one hell of a root system to go with this plant now. These were the old roots, not very good. I mean, these are effectively dead roots. They serve no purpose. Yeah, they've long since gone. But they've been totally replaced. So I expect this plant to grow healthily and do well. Good root system, loads of new growths. Why wouldn't it? Unless it gets some sort of bacterial problem or fungal infection or something, which I do keep my eye open for. Now here's a novelty. This one. This is Dinema polybulbon. And this one does not like staying where it's put, as you can see. I put it on the mount, it's doing its best to get off of it. And it extends in many directions, or that this was all of the leads taken off the mother plant and remounted. The old centre part of the plant was just dumped, I believe. I might have given it to somebody else, I can't remember. But I expected each one of those new pieces to grow. They did. So it did as expected. As far as blooms are concerned on this one, from past experience, it blooms on pseudobulbs 3 or 4 away from the growing tip. So if you took that growing tip there, yeah, we got a new growth coming out there. It's also pushing out sideways on that one, so that's 2, 3, 4. That's the one that's most likely to bloom, and it already has, so it won't do it again. Yeah, coming down here, I would expect possible blooms back here. Up here, I'd expect blooms around this area. On this one, possibly around here. Now, I'm not sure if this has a time of year or whether it blooms when it's good and ready. It may even bloom on and off. But in anticipation, this one's going to get chopped at some point down the line. Probably the next time I do an Orchids to Go, that, and probably that will be an orchid to go for somebody else to start and try it. Yeah? Because there'll come a time when these roots won't be as good as they are now, because they will eventually dry off. I mean, when I water this, I pour water over the whole plant. So everything gets absolutely soaked, including these aerial roots. But there could come a time where that's not enough for these aerial roots and they start losing their growing tips. Now what I could do is strap that. I could take that one and possibly bring it up here and strap it and try and get it to start growing on the mount and fill up these two gaps here. I may well do that. I could do it with this one too. Just point it up like that. But you can train this. You can train it like a piece of ivy, quite honestly. But I would like to see some blooms on that during this growing season. It should bloom. But exactly where, I'm not quite sure, because there's so many little pieces on here, it's difficult to tell. But it should bloom eventually. That'll do its thing. Very attractive little blooms there. Right, a funny one now. Twinkles. Now this is Tiny Twinkle. Now bearing in mind the twinkles have one parent, Sotoanum. I'll show you that one in a minute, deliberately after this one. Yeah? So this one bloomed, did its thing. All the new growths, I believe, produced 2 spikes each. That's typical of twinkles. That is their trait. So this Oncidium type does like to push up 2 spikes per bulb. There's, I believe, did I remount this? No, I didn't remount this. I just gave it some new moss. But it is several pieces. This is not all joined together. You can see this is a separate piece. So that's a young plant now. This one's a reasonable plant and the big plant's up there. But what I've got going on here is, in a lot of cases, 2 new growths per bulb. That are good. That's effectively doubling the size of the plant, isn't it? But I've got new growths coming out all over the place, literally. Now what's going to happen to those? They will grow on through this season, yeah? They will mature, they will show their bulbs, then they will produce their spikes. Because I've had this one quite a while, so I know exactly what it's going to do. When it's going to do it is a little uncertain, because a lot of the Oncidiums have not got an annual cycle. They mature their bulbs and start their spikes in less than a year. So their blooming season slowly moves backwards. So like when, say, you bought it in bloom in April, the next year it might bloom in March. The following year it could even be January. They just keep slowly moving backwards. That will bloom on all of those new growths when they're mature, whenever that is. So I know exactly what it's going to do. Now, that's a Tiny Twinkle. Bearing in mind it has a Sotoanum parent. This is another twinkle. Look at the difference in size. Yeah? This one in comparison is huge, but then that was called Tiny Twinkle, wasn't it? And this one is, I don't know. I think this is the pinky red one, I'm not sure. But these new growths are absolutely stunning. They really are forcing their way out all over the place. Exactly the same thing's going to happen to that. There won't be any spikes on the existing plant. They will come on those new growths. Notice the statement. They will come on those new growths. There isn't any doubt. Unless there's any form of infection or something that takes the plant down, that's going to bloom. And it will bloom on, what have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Coming around the side there, 7, 8. There's 10 plus new growths pushing on that plant, with the potential for at least 1 and probably 2 per spike. That will be a showpiece. It's not open to debate, it just will. But the problem I've got with this one, which I didn't notice when I got it, is somebody had hacked quite a few of the leaves. They had some brown tips. There's one that hasn't been hacked. Now I didn't cut these, they were cut by, the seller to make it look pretty to sell. That's one of mine. I can tell because it's got the V shape. But nonetheless, once these new growths mature and they've got their nice shiny new leaves all over the plant, these older leaves can be snipped back to the base of the bulb so that they don't show anymore. Yeah, and that will make that plant look pretty good. So, blooms to come. Not open to debate, that one. Now, as I said, I started with Tiny Twinkle. That's a twinkle. Now let's have a look at the parent. Oh, this is heavy. This is Sotoanna, which is the parent of the twinkles. Difficult to work out, isn't it? Whatever this is crossed with to make the twinkles must be a tiny little plant to make it work. This is enormous. This is this one size. This is what it's supposed to look like. Now, anticipation on this one is based on new growths. The older bulbs have already bloomed. It was in bloom when I got it. So the next lot of blooms will be mine, not bought in. We've got lovely new growth here, pushing on. Another one here, pushing on. You know, this one is so vigorous, I'm having trouble hydrating this. This hasn't long been watered and that pot's dry. Now, in my normal pot cycle of watering, this is drying off far too quick, and it's because of its vigour. Another new growth tucked in there, another one here, pushing on. Let's have a dig, see if we can find, what have we got then? That one hasn't got any spikes showing yet. It will have. And I think we actually looked, I think this one, yeah, this one here has a spike, so this is the first one. Excuse me, if you look at it, it is the most mature bulb. You can tell by how much of the pseudo bulb is actually visible. If you come round to this one, not much. None, yeah? None. Some, quite a lot. So that's the most mature new growth. And when they're fully mature, you can see virtually all of the pseudo bulb, yeah? So I was just having a look at some of the older bulbs that bloomed. This bloomed with 2 spikes on most of those growths, not all of them. So I can expect 1 to 2 spikes per new growth. Hopefully with the vigour of the plant, if I can flip and keep up with it, 2 per new growth. But at least 1. So spikes will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minimum, max 10. Yeah. So coming on, I'm going to leave that here, that needs watering. Even though it's out of cycle, I'll put it back because otherwise it's going to be in the way. Yeah, that's out of cycle. It's so vigorous, it's drying out faster than the set it belongs to. And what I need to do now, I may not do it today because apart from that one, it's not their turn. I've now got to go round and rearrange plants, not based on the shelf I would prefer to have them on, but I need a shelf of recently repotted Oncidium types that are in normal pots because they're drying, now that we're getting into the growing season, faster than my normal watering cycle. So I've got to, I've got to deal with that. Right, anticipation again. Let's have a look at one of these. Not that I do very well with these, but I'm doing a bit better than in the past. This is half of the Amordier. I actually split it in 2. And this hasn't bloomed. So for me, this is difficult to anticipate. That's an unbloomed growth. Well, there's no sign of any new ones coming, which implies from past experience that that one's going to bloom. And the new growth won't come until afterwards. But it could be a blind growth. Because it's had long enough, it ought to be showing signs if it's going to do it. There is actually a shadow down in there, so it might be going to bloom. If it's going to bloom, it will do it relatively soon, and it probably won't produce any new growths till it's finished. Yeah? Or there shouldn't be an S on the end of that. With me growing Paphiopedilums, it'll be new growth, singular. And then the old bit will die. But it is pushing out some new roots, just. So anticipation on this is a possible bloom, if not a new growth, which should then bloom. Yeah, so it's relatively predictable, if painfully slow. Painfully slow. Ugh. Right, let's have a look at something. And now for something totally different. Oh no, it's completely different. First of all, I've just picked this up and boy is that dry. It's because I was out all day yesterday. Now this is Masdevallia ignea, which for me is a notorious failure. But for once I've got a good one going on. Now in anticipation on this, I've got probably a third, maybe a quarter of the leaves on this plant are new ones. Yeah, the new ones haven't opened their leaves fully and are still growing, and there are many. Yeah, at some point, I don't know when, that will spike because it's produced a lot of new growth since I got it, but I don't know when. I haven't had it long enough. I'm happy it's alive, but keeping it as dry as that, it might not be too long. So I need to get, there's another one I need to get at. It's because it's in new moss, yeah, with some bark inside the moss, yeah, it's all new. That's what I'm saying. I need to separate out things that have been recently repotted. They're drying far faster than my normal watering cycle, so I need to separate them out and keep up with them. So I'll end up with 2 sets, won't I? So be it. But there is a stash of new growths on that. And it's alive. The previous 3 weren't, or aren't. So, yeah, anticipation, hopefully some blooms. They are fabulous. But keeping it alive is good. It's a real cold grower, that one. Not cool, that's a cold grower. What else? Something entirely different. Oh, let's tell this one off again collectively, shall we? All together now. Why won't you bloom? Now, this is my Wilbur Chang tyke. Now, I must admit it matured quite a few new growths last year, and they all started pushing something out at the base which I anticipated wrongly were going to be blooms, and they're all new growths. So we now have things like this going on. Nice strong new growths coming up. Yeah, I think there's 4 of them in there somewhere. Yeah, there's 4. The most mature is this one. Why have I got marks on my leaf? What's that? Yeah, I don't know. It's a simple answer, but I've got some here as well on that. That's an old leaf. I'm not particularly worried about when I see marks on older leaves. And the really oldest leaves are starting to yellow, so they may be going to drop. But the new growth's strong and healthy. I mean, I could have a deficiency, although that spotting there looks more like perhaps some water sat on there and got hot. There's no bugs on there, it's not bugs. So I don't know what that's going to do. My anticipation for that is that the new growths push on and produce a nice shiny clean leaf. Apart from that, I don't know, because it just doesn't want to bloom. They say if you do the same thing over and over again, you can expect the same results. So that needs to move. Yeah, that needs to either go to a warmer spot or a brighter spot or both. But leaving it where it is, where it's been for some considerable time, is not going to do. It's not going to hack it, is it? If it didn't bloom on that last set of new growths, it's not happy, or it would have done. The plant's plenty big enough to be blooming size. So that needs a move. Not today. Oh. Right, let's get this monster out. We don't ever look at this. Oh. Oof. Right, this is Bulbophyllum Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry. Sorry, Elizabeth Ann Buckleberries. I can't remember how many plants went in here, 3 or 4. I just basically took the leads off and did a community pot. Now, in anticipation on this, in the past, every time this matures a growth, it blooms. That's what it's done in the past. And I've got a lot of maturing new growths. This one, and a lot of new ones. This one's pushing on. Got one here, one buried down the side there, just poking its little nose up. Another one tucked in there. So, oh, that nice big one there. There's a lot of growths pushing towards maturity. So in anticipation, we will get bloom spikes on that, in the not too distant future. Yeah? And all of those new growths are pushing roots out like good ones, so that's going to increase its ability to push on by extending its root system. So yeah, anticipation on that. Blooms soon. And it's probably going to be staggered because the growths are maturing at a different rate, so we may have bloom spikes on that over quite a long period of time. We shall see. But it will bloom. It's going to bloom. That's not open to debate. It always has. I don't see why it shouldn't now. Right round here. These are nearly all Miltonias. Well, that one's not. That's an Aliciara. Now this was a rescue. The older part of the plant got taken off, and I tried it on a mount. It's always been in a pot for me, and it's been being rescued for some considerable time, and I thought, well, it didn't seem to like the way I was growing it before. Try on a mount. Why not? I got the room, so I put it on a mount. This growth's maturing, but it's undersized, but it's also produced some roots. Got another new growth here, and another one up the end that was never going to be a good one. This was a very weak growth. That's not going to develop now, but it might start another one at the base. So this is the hope on this one. That's not big enough to bloom, and if it tried to bloom, I'd stop it. The plant hasn't got enough strength in it yet. So that's probably as big as that's going to get. That's stalled. There's the hope for that plant. In anticipation, I'd like to see that bulb get up to a reasonable size. Whether it ever reaches that size, probably not. It's more likely to be this sort of size. But if it gets a good pair of leaves on it, yeah, that'll increase the strength of the plant, and it will be good to see some roots pushing out of the base, which it isn't doing yet. But then this one hasn't long started new roots, so that one's going to follow suit. The roots will come soon, but not yet. But I'd like to see that growth get to a reasonable mature size, and again, if it attempts to bloom, I'll stop it. The ones that will bloom will be the next set of new growths it produces, because then it will have the backup of this one and this one. Forget that one, that's not a lot of use to the plant. Yeah, and even the oldest bulb back here has still got 2 leaves on it. Yeah, this one here has still got 2 leaves on it. This one's dropped its leaves, so there's an amount of leaves on here, but that's its hope for a mature bulb, and it may well try and spike. But as I said, if it does, I'll stop it. I'll take the spike off. And then the next set of new growths, hopefully the plant might be strong enough to let at least one of them bloom. I don't want to lose that plant, and if I can be bothered, I'll put a pop-up for the reason why I'm prepared to struggle with that for so long. I mean, it did have Fusarium, don't get me wrong. Didn't get off to a good start. Yeah. So that's that one. The winter resting dendrobiums, there is no anticipation there. I know what to do, when to do it, and when they're going to bloom. They just do that. And in that set, I don't think there's any new ones to work out. Yeah? But I've got some dendrobiums that are not doing as expected or anticipated. But can I get at them? No. My Dendrobium Nesta that had those 2 lovely canes full of those lovely rich purple blooms with the delightful fragrance has only got 1 new growth. That wasn't anticipated, and at the moment it's about that long and there's no sign of another one coming. So I've gone from 3 small canes that bloomed to 2 full-size large ones that bloomed to 1. Why is that not growing as well as it ought to be? I'd have expected 2 canes at least this year, and I've only got 1. But then my Aphyllum, if I can get at that one, I must be able to get something up here without getting them all down. Yeah, this one was bought as quite a young plant, and first year it matured a cane and bloomed. Last year, or this year, this spring, I think it bloomed on 2 or maybe 3 canes. This one has got 4 new canes, 2 of which are heading off like rockets. Yeah, bearing in mind that's the longest, well, let's get back a bit, that's the longest cane I've got, and these two new growths are already half the length of that cane, and it's only just June. Still got 3 months of growing yet, if not more, and two coming on behind, one with a mealybug. It's the first one I've spotted all day today and yesterday. I have got an odd one here and there. That's probably not going to produce any more new growths now, but look at the roots. There aren't any. That doesn't produce its new root system until the canes are like over half their size that they should be. It relies on the existing old root system. Yeah. So virtually, no. Some of these roots up here are branching. Yeah. But the new root system hasn't started yet. And that's what it's always done. I don't expect the new roots on this to come out with the new growths. They come later in the year. But in anticipation for full-size canes, all of which will bloom next year. Not might, will. Don't know what I'm doing with that one. I've had it a while now, so you know. Some things are predictable, some things aren't. This one, I'll just go over this one and then that will do for today. This one has planned growth because of its sheer size. Let's get back at it. Yeah. So I turned it at that angle, this is going back a few years now, to get the new canes to head off to one side. So that would be 3 years ago. Yeah. It blooms on 2-year-old canes. Yeah. And then last year I forced the new growths to come out this side of the plant. This is next year's blooms, this set of canes here, and they're all nicely together. Yeah, that's going to be a show like that, all in one place. This year's growths are up the top here. At the moment I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got 5 new canes coming at the moment. There's still time for this one to push. Oh, there's another one round there, 6. So this one. And the new roots are just starting on this. They're not all coming out from where the new growths are. They're coming out from many places, including branching on existing. But I'm keeping this one in such a way, I hope, that these new growths are going to go that side of the plant over the top of what will be deciduous canes after it's finished blooming and this season's done. This part of the plant here will probably have no leaves left and will look a bit untidy. I'm trying to get the new growths to grow down that side. If the new growths grow down this side, they'll be over the top of the blooms next year. So I need them out there. So I'm deliberately keeping this one at a funny angle. And I'm going to alternate each year. New growths that way, next year that way, next year that way. So that I get that mass blooming. Because it looks good. And wins first, Bournemouth Orchid Society, and gets me a nice big certificate. So that's that. So that's just a chat about anticipation. It can only happen when you know your plants or the type. Yeah? If you repeat a type, like if you've got an Oncidium twinkle, and you've had it quite a while and you know what it does, and you get another one, the chances are the new one you've got in will do exactly the same as the old one. Not necessarily at the same time, but it will do it. Yeah, I'll leave it for that. I haven't got a clue how long I've been waffling on. Could be an hour, might only be half an hour, but whatever it is, that's what you're going to get. I hope you've enjoyed that. That's something different. As I said, there is a predictability about some orchids. I mean, I've got some orchids in here that are predicted to die. I didn't get any of them out today. There's a couple of zygos lurking in there that may be in that category. This one, last one, this was a nothing plant when I got it. You've heard me talk about the big box orchids, and then there was Big Box Junior, some more plants from Beatrix. As a thank you for looking after all the others, yeah? And in amongst 3 nice cattleyas was this, and this is Victoria Regina, or it might be one day, it isn't yet. And it was a plant that had failure written all over it. But it's produced a new growth. It's weak and feeble, and in behind it are a couple of new growths, new roots. So it's not dead, but that is years off becoming anything any good or anywhere near blooming size. That cane might not grow much more than that, but at least it's now got the chance of a few leaves. They're nowhere near the right size to be able to feed that plant. So that's on, it's on a death list really, but it's not dead, and it is making an effort to grow. I can't say what that's going to do next. That new growth could fail, and then there's nothing left. Yeah, it might start another one, stronger, better. But even this cane here is nowhere near the size that it ought to be on a fully mature version of this plant. So I don't know what that's going to do next. Hopefully live. That'll do for now, just live. That'd be nice. Okay, so that's that one. Something a bit different, I suppose, and yeah, I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. This was planned on being a live broadcast, but things took over during the week and stuff like that, and it didn't happen. And it's not going to happen next weekend because I'm at Malvern, so maybe the weekend after that. I'll see what I can do. Anyway, thanks for dropping by. See you next time.